My reactions to week 16 of the or week 17 of the 2024-25 NFL season. Um, Starting with well, honestly, there was like a 2 day gap between each game. Honestly, well between Monday, the final day of week 15 or week 16, and uh, Christmas, which was the first day of week 17. So there really wasn't much of a gap. It was only like 2 days, but the Chiefs beat the living dog shit out of the Steelers. Steelers, I don't know what the heck's happening with them. Um, I would say that their offense is anemic without George Pickens, but they can't really make that excuse anymore, considering the fact that George Pickens is now back. Although he might be traded in the future due to some off the field stuff, him being a diva. Seems to have been the case for the Steelers the last couple of times with their receivers. Started off with Antonio Brown, and then Juju Smith-Schuster, then Chase Claypool, and now George Pickens. But it was a horrible, horrible game for the Steelers. They got blown out. Patrick Mahomes didn't have an insane game. He had 3 touchdowns, one to 3 different receivers. But they just beat the living crap out of the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and the Steelers might be one and done again this year in the playoffs. Ravens at Texans. Speaking of another team that blew the living doors off a team on the road, the Ravens pretty much toyed with the Texans, honestly. Lamar Jackson had 3 touchdowns, 2 through the air, 1 on the ground. Derrick Henry had 27 carries, 147 yards rushing, and a touchdown. And Texans just looked exhausted. They looked mentally exhausted. They looked physically exhausted. There was a 4 game. They pretty much had to play 4 games after being devastated by the game against the Chiefs, in which they lost one of their soldiers, metaphorically speaking, in Tank Dell. Got a feel for him. He's probably going to be out for next year also, along with Demarion Obershone from the Cowboys. But it's just unfortunate. But the Texans, they did not look like they were ready to play this game, honestly. The Ravens absolutely were. The last 3 weeks, the Ravens have looked dominant. And if they do again tomorrow, they're gaining momentum at the right moment, which is sometimes what it's all about. It's not always about the number 1 seed in the AFC or the NFC. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's about who gets hot at the right moment in the NFL. If there's one thing I've learned from watching football for like 9 years, it's that. But great win for the Ravens. For the Texans, they need to get their stuff together. They play the Titans on Sunday in Tennessee, which they could lose, but we'll see. The Chargers on Saturday football. The Chargers beat the living crap out of the Patriots in Foxborough, which doesn't really have the same ring to it anymore. These are obviously not the same Tom Brady-led Patriots, but the Chargers still destroyed them 40-7. Justin Herbert had 2 touchdowns, or 3 touchdowns. 2 of them were to Ladd McConkey, who had a big game, and J.K. Dobbins played pretty well too. Yeah, it was a great win for the Chargers as they now clinch a playoff spot. And the Patriots, they're one step closer to getting Travis Hunter. So, yeah. Broncos at Bengals. This was really one of the games of the year, honestly. the Bengals beat the Broncos in overtime 30-24. It was really a crazy game up until, well, in the fourth quarter, towards the end of the game, pretty much, Marvin Mims scored an insane touchdown, which at first didn't look like a touchdown, but then it was a touchdown, and then the Bengals got the ball back. They didn't really do much with it, but then the game went into overtime. Both teams got a possession. Both missed field goals. Then Bo Nix threw an interception. The Bengals got the ball back, and Burrow just said, "Fuck it. I'm not gonna leave it up to my kicker who just missed a kick. And he scored a touchdown and Joe Burrow ended up scoring the game-winning touchdown to T. Higgins. So the Bengals are still alive, and the Broncos, so are the Broncos, but they beat the Chiefs. They're in. If they don't, then the Bengals win and the Dolphins lose. And I think the Colts are already eliminated from playoff contention. So as long as the Dolphins lose and the Broncos lose too, and the Bengals beat the Steelers, then the Bengals are in. But we'll see. It should be an interesting should be an interesting week, final week, but I'm gonna get to that later. Cardinals at Rams. This game was really low scoring. The Rams ended up beating the Cardinals 13-9. And towards the end of the game, it looked like Kyler Murray was going to score a touchdown to at least give the Cardinals the lead with some time remaining, I think. But Trey McBride, he threw it to Trey McBride over the middle. I think there was somebody else open, but he threw it to Trey McBride. Trey McBride couldn't make the catch, ended up bobbling it, tipped it in the air, and was ultimately intercepted by Ahkello Witherspoon. But that was another great game. There were two great games the weekend. But yeah, we're getting into the final stretch. Sunday football. Colts at Giants. The Colts didn't show up, and the Giants they scored the most points they have all season, as they beat the Colts 45-33. Drew Lock had a day, and the Giants may have ultimately cost themselves the number one pick with the win against the Colts. But we'll see. But obviously the players, they played, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to continue to fight no matter what. But from the fans' perspective, it's pretty bad. It's pretty disappointing for the Giants fans. I feel for you, Giants fans, but yeah, it was not a good win. For the team it was, but for the fans, it was a disappointment. Now we'll see if they can even get a quarterback in the draft in the first round, but we'll see. Titans at Jaguars. The Jaguars beat the Titans 20-13. Brian Thomas continues to have a very good season. Had another touchdown in this game. And it seems like pretty much every LSU receiver that's come out of LSU has done pretty well. Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, going back as far as them. Then Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Then now you got Brian Thomas Jr. Who else? There was a few more LSU receivers that have pretty much been stars this year. One of them Oh, Malik Neighbors also. And there's a few more coming in the draft also. Kyron Lacey, and there's a few more, but I can't really think of their names right now. But yeah, it was a great win for the Jaguars. Even though they do drop a draft pick, weren't like they weren't going to draft a quarterback anyways. They already paid Trevor Lawrence a boatload of money. But the Titans, yeah, they currently hold the number 2 pick and are probably going to draft a quarterback, unless they beat the Texans next week. Which, as a person rooting for the Giants, I'm not a Giants fan, but I am rooting for them to turn their future around. I hope the Titans win. I hope the who has the number 1 pick? I know the Jets don't. The Patriots had the number 1 pick, and they're probably not going to draft a quarterback because they got Drake May already. So they're probably going to end up drafting Travis Hunter. But hopefully the Titans win. Hopefully the Giants lose to the Eagles, and hopefully we'll see what happens. But hopefully the Giants get a top 3 pick still, and are able to get their quarterback. But we'll see. Jets at Bills. This game was a pretty close game at the half. Then the second half happened, and the Jets completely unraveled. Aaron Rodgers had the worst passer rating since pretty much ever. One of the worst. I think it was. I can't remember who was worse, but it was. I think Davis Mills was worse actually a few years ago, but the Jets just completely fell apart in the second half, and the Bills destroyed the Jets 40-14. And Josh Allen didn't really even have to lift a finger, honestly, to do that much against the Jets. They just completely collapsed in the second half. The Jets did. But the Bills now locked up the number 2 seed, and they don't have home field advantage, but they do until they have to play the Chiefs potentially in the AFC Championship game, which is more than likely going to happen because the Chiefs always find a way to get in the AFC Championship game, even when they don't play that well in the regular season. But, I mean, just see last year. But we'll see. Raiders at Saints. Speaking of another team that cost themselves a draft position, the Raiders beat the Saints 25-10 and worsened their draft pick. They no longer have a chance to draft either quarterback. They might end up having to wait until the 3rd, 4th round to draft somebody like a Quinn Ewers or a Dylan Gabriel. But they won the last 2 games, and I'm a credit to the team for fighting, but that's what you're supposed to do in the NFL. That's what you should do in the NFL is keep fighting no matter what. But Brock Bowers is also having a Rookie of the Year type of season. He's probably not going to win it because Jaden Daniels is balling out of his mind, and he's a rookie quarterback for the Commanders, but I'll get to him later. And for the Saints, Spencer Rattler, I don't know what to think about him because I'm not gonna say. I don't think, first of all, for the Browns, which I'll get to later. I don't think the Browns have their franchise quarterback, but the Saints. I'm not saying that Spencer Rattler will be that guy, but I think his weapons need to get healthy. I mean, both Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are out for the year, so once they come back, I'll really be able to evaluate Spencer Rattler along with other people. But He's looked pretty good at times. He's not looked great, but he's also not looked terrible. He's looked pretty decent. But again, his offensive line is injured, and so is his top receivers. But the Saints, they had a promising start to the season. They started the season off 2-0, lost 10 straight, including giving the Panthers their first one of the season. But yeah, it's just been a disappointment since then. A lot of injuries have really derailed their season. But yeah, it's just been a disappointment for the Saints this year. After blowing out the first two opponents they played this year. Speaking of blowouts, Panthers at Buccaneers. This is 2 straight weeks that the well, is it 2 straight weeks? No, actually it's not, because the Panthers won last week, but it's 2 of the last 3 games the Panthers have gotten destroyed. Once to the Cowboys, this week to the Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield had another day. I think he had 5 touchdowns. And the Panthers, other than really the last 2 of the last 3 weeks, they've looked better recently, but they just didn't look good at all this game. They just got dominated from start to finish. And the Buccaneers, they're now in control of their fate. If they win again next week against the Saints in Tampa Bay, they clinch the division. But especially now with the Falcons losing to the Commanders. But spoiler alert. But yeah, it was a blowout for the Buccaneers. Another blowout game, Cowboys at Eagles. The Eagles just rocked the Cowboys. It was so bad. The game, first of all, the starting quarterback for the Eagles was already not playing because he was out. He was ruled out before the game. Then again, so is Dak Prescott. He's also out for the year. He got injured a couple weeks ago. But still, the Eagles, this was such a dominant win for the Eagles that they scored a touchdown with their third-string quarterback. That's how you know a team is getting destroyed, is when the other team's third-string quarterback is scoring touchdowns on you. And that's exactly what happened. The Cowboys did not show up at all this game. And it was another blowout loss for them. The good news for them, it was in Philadelphia, but still it was an awful game. I think Micah Parsons after the game said that when you take the scoreboard away, it was a pretty close game. That just sounds ridiculous to me. But like sure, buddy. Just forget just don't look at the scoreboard. You did pretty well, you know. May have given up 40 points, but you know it was an absolute shit show, is what it was. And Jerry Jones won a Goofy Award for the worst. It was the worst something, but it was embarrassing for Jerry Jones, and that's the Cowboys this year. They're just an embarrassment for the most part this year, and yeah, it really showed this game. As Saquon Barkley is now less than 100 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's record, which has been held for the last 20 years, basically. But we'll see if he breaks it. Again, I mean, he's got a very good chance to break it, considering they play the Giants next week in Philadelphia. But we'll see if the Eagles even play their starters next week, because they won't really need to. But yeah, it was just a dominant win from the Eagles. And for the Cowboys, just more of the same. Dolphins at Browns. The Dolphins beat the Browns 20-3. I thought DTR was a pretty good quarterback. I thought he would be potentially the future for the Browns. Turns out I'm full of crap. DTR does not look like the answer at all for the Browns. As with him, the Browns got destroyed 20-3. And right now the Browns just look like a better team with Jameis Winston as opposed to with DTR, who is not the answer in Cleveland. But for the Dolphins, it was pretty impressive considering they weren't with they didn't have Tua Tagovailoa in the game, aka Tua turned the ball over, but it was still a dominant win for them. They won the game 20-3, and the Dolphins are still alive in the playoff race, and if they beat the Jets next week, they're in the playoffs, despite what the Bengals or Broncos do. Packers at Vikings. The Vikings beat the Packers 27-25. It really wasn't as close as the score indicates. The Vikings were up by as many as 17 points at some point in the game. The Packers almost made a comeback, but they almost did. The Packers, for whatever reason, they just can't beat playoff teams for the most part. And it showed again this game. They did not really play that well up until like the last few minutes of the game, where they even put themselves in a position to potentially have a chance to win the game. Even though the possibility was like 0.00001%, but it was still a chance. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was still a chance. But it was another win for the Vikings as they now keep pace with the Lions. And it's going to come down to the Week 18 showdown on Sunday Night Football in Detroit between the Vikings and the Lions for who gets the number 1 seed, home field advantage in the playoffs, and who also gets the bye in the first round and doesn't have to play a wild card weekend. And it should be an excellent, excellent game. I got the Lions winning that game because it's in Detroit, but it should be a very exciting game either way. Falcons at Commanders. The Commanders beat the Falcons 30-24 in overtime. It was really a back and forth game. It was a 14-point lead for the Falcons at the half. Then the Commanders came back, took a lead. The Falcons came back and tied the game, sent the game into overtime. And the Falcons, Michael Penix had a pretty good game. He scored a touchdown to even give the team a chance to get the game into overtime. He scored a touchdown to, I think it was Drake London. No, it was Kyle Pitts, actually, with like 1 second left, which was this was just a crazy back and forth game. But the Falcons never got a chance to get the ball in overtime, and the Commanders did, and they made the Falcons pay, and, well, not really pay, but, they still won the game, scored a game-winning touchdown to, I think it might have been Olamide Zaccheaus, or actually, no, it was Zach Ertz, who had a pretty good game. He had 2 touchdowns in the game, but there was another gutsy win for the Commanders, and for the Falcons, they no longer control their own fate. They need to win next week, and they need the Buccaneers to lose to the Saints, which probably is not going to happen. When you consider the fact that, especially when you consider the fact that the game is going to be played in Tampa Bay for the Saints, but anything could happen. So, but yeah, the Falcons no longer control their own fate this season. So we'll see what happens. And for the final game of the week, Lions 49ers. Lions beat the 49ers, I think it was 40-34. Um, it was a nightmare. Well, it looked like a nightmare defense. Well, it was a nightmare for the defense of the Lions, who have pretty much half their defense on the ICU, in the ICU, and it's just, yeah, their defense is potentially going to be their downfall this season because they're just so banged up. But offensively, they were able to score 40 points against a very good defense in the 49ers, who were playing Nick Bosa, who I guess you could argue is better than, who is better than Joey Bosa. Part of that is because of Joey Bosa constantly pretty much being injured. But the Lions pretty much went up and down the field against the 49ers. And really, this game turned when Brock Purdy played he played really well in the first half, and then in the third quarter or fourth quarter, he I don't know what happened to him. He may have had a concussion because he threw 2 straight interceptions straight to Kirby Joseph, and that really turned the game in the Lions' favor and really helped the Lions win the game. If it weren't for those 2 interceptions, the Niners had a very good chance to win the game because the Niners pretty much did whatever they wanted to offensively against the Lions' banged up defense. But it was a great win for the Lions. A lot of people said that this game didn't mean anything. I don't think so. This is the same team that knocked them out of the playoffs last year. So they wanted to get their get back against the 49ers. And yeah, it was a great win. They were able to stay healthy, and they head into week 18 in a showdown of all showdowns, basically, against the Vikings in Detroit for them. So that gives them that does definitely give them the advantage, the Lions, playing in Detroit. But this is for not only the division, but also the number 1 seed. And it should be a great game. But it was another great week of football, and we'll see what happens week 18, the final week of the regular season before the playoffs. But it was another great week. All right, I'll catch y'all later. Deuces.